Hi friends, my name is Andrew Connard. I'm the pastor of Susanna Wesley United Methodist Church, and welcome to the 13th week of our Leader Development Book Club as we're reading through Canoeing the Mountains, a book that takes a look at the Lewis and Clark expedition and how they encountered unexpected terrain and how we might use lessons from their experience to lead churches and organizations into a future that's uncharted. And today we're taking a closer look at chapter 13 at 2 Church. It talks about sabotage, which really isn't fun to think about, but is a part of the reality of the transformational system. And so I'm going to take some time to talk through the content of this book and share some reflections for my own life as well as for Susanna and Wesley. And I'm going to invite you to do the same thing as well. I hope that you're reading through and considering, reflecting on what can I learn from these words that might help me take action to be more effective? And how might Susanna and Wesley use these words to guide us together into the future? He shares an example of his work with the Presbyterian Church in which the denomination takes action or fails to take action on a report that he was a part of. And what he experienced was that there were key leaders who were willing to support him in private, but not willing to speak up for him in public. And he describes this issue, this reality in the part of change in any organization as sabotage. He writes this from Thomas Friedman. He shares these words. For Friedman, the peacemonger is a description of a leader, is the leader whose own high degree of anxiety leads him to prefer harmony to health, to appease complainers just to quiet them, but who will not actually demand that they take responsibility for their own part in the organizational problem. He identifies the reality that these people, those that act in this way, are in every organization, that the response to sabotage, to a change effort or an initiative that's moving forward is just part of life in organizations. The idea that everyone will always have your back is just a fantasy, he shares. He writes, if the change process is start with conviction, stay connected, stay calm, and stay the course, then when you're focused on staying the course, expect that it is your own people who are going to try to knock you off course. And the key to staying the course is wisely and calmly responding to sabotage. Not reacting, he says, but responding. Now, for me, it was so fascinating to know and to hear him write about that sabotage is part of the process. Sometimes when I've been a part of a change in organizations, I've thought, well, where is this coming from? It's a bit of a surprise. And what the author here suggests is that people working against change, even if it's positive, even if they seem to agree with it and believe that this is the way that God is calling us, is just a fact of being in organizations. It is part of being sabotaged, and sometimes we're the ones that cause it, and sometimes we are the ones that are experiencing it. It's just one of those things that is part of transformational change in any organization. He writes, sabotage is natural, it's normal. It's part and process of the systemic process of leadership. Saboteurs are usually doing nothing but unconsciously supporting the status quo. Unconsciously supporting the status quo. Transformational change talks about changing the way that we're living together, the way that we're operating, the way that we're inviting people to know Jesus, how we're living our life together. And it's just natural that this would come up. First, he gives several guidance for us about what to do when we're to understand sabotage when it comes about. First, he says, expect sabotage. Anticipation is a great defense. Second, embrace sabotage as a normal part of an organizational life. Now, I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. And yet he says, and I believe his words here, that this is a regular part of significant and transformational change that's a part of the need for every organization, every church to live faithfully into the future. We have to continually think about how are we being faithful to what God is calling us to? How do we connect with our community? And that means that we need to change the way that we've done things around here. And sabotage is part of that process, he writes. Third, he said, don't take it personally. This sabotage is not about the leader. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's just about the changes that are taking place. He writes, the people following you may be shooting you in the back, but it's really not you that they're sabotaging. It's your role as leader. It's not possible. It's not personal. They are sabotaging the change that you are bringing forth. He says, focus your attention on the emotionally strong and not the saboteurs. Focus your attention on those that are emotionally strong and not the saboteurs. Find other calm, courageous people and strengthen and support them. This is fascinating and a great help for me to begin to understand how do we respond to sabotage? Not really by focusing on the saboteurs, but by finding others that are calm, acting with conviction, seeking to follow what God would have in mind for us, and working with those folks. He writes about the idea that leaders make the future. It's a transformational change that really helps bring organizations into the next faithful step for them, that helps them begin to continue to grow forward and stay healthy, as opposed to moving into a place of decline and not moving forward. He writes that Friedman noted that when a leader offers healthy, consistent, clear, convicted presence, what Friedman calls taking a stand, the organizational system begins to adapt toward health. I begin to see that the same emotional processes that produce dysfunction in an institution when the leader was anxiously reactive or absent could work in reverse. It's possible that when the leader stays cool, makes clear decisions based on their convictions, and is present in the system, that it will turn towards health. Now, this isn't easy to do, but it's necessary to do to keep moving forward and making changes. The author comes back to this idea of blue zone decisions, about how do we make decisions that are expressed based on the core values and healthy principles of the organization, and are further discerned by the shared mission conviction of the group. Make decisions not based on your personal preference or the personal preference of others, but based on the mission and the values that we've decided that we all share together. I think we have some progress here at Susanna and Wesley to be really clear and to clarify what are those values, how are we most faithfully making decisions together. And he writes that a healthy system makes decisions that further the mission. Perhaps the hardest truth to swallow for most Christian leaders trying to lead change is this: you must choose principles over personal need. You must choose principles over personal need. I don't know that people would say I'm choosing my needs over those of others intentionally. Sometimes they might, but it's a reminder to say, it's not really about what I think. It's about what God is calling us to. It's about the principles that have shaped our organization from the beginning, clarifying, naming those, making sure that we're on the same page about them, and then using those to make decisions as we move forward. He says that this type of work requires courage. It's necessary that you have to face difficult situations. He says no matter how strong our convictions, we all know that sooner or later we might suffer from what Edwin Friedman calls a failure of nerve, the tendency among leaders to adapt to immaturity, that is, to give in to the most anxious elements within themselves or within the community who are clamoring to preserve the status quo, and undermining the adaptations and experiments necessary for moving forward and meeting the challenges in front of them. To combat this tendency, all the best leadership literature says that we need courage. Man, it can be so much easier in the short term to give in to the forces that want to protect the status quo. It takes courage and calm and conviction to stay the course and keep moving forward. He shares the example of the movie, the great classic movie of Casablanca, and a scene where Victor Laszlo takes action by standing up and gives an example and helps us draw some correlations about how we might take action in our own leadership opportunities. He says, first, leaders must act. They must take action. It's action towards a preferred future. Second, when sabotage or opposition appears, leaders continue to calmly stand on conviction in the face of it. Third, leaders inspire. And last, leaders don't act alone. He makes great parallels with a particular scene in the movie, and I want to make sure that you've taken the time to read that. It's a great comparison. It's a classic movie I studied in college, and it's really helpful when considering how do I take action in leadership today. He writes this: the paradox of transformational leaders is that the very conviction that causes the leader to be willing to disappoint your own followers at a rate they can absorb is what ultimately, when handled well, wins your own followers to join in your cause. The very conviction that says, I will need to disappoint you. Your expectations might be for things as they are, and yet we need to move forward into new things, to doing things differently, to the change that God is calling to us, that the places where God is already at work, we need to go there. And that means we're going to have to change the way things go. And that very conviction that draws us in the first place is the very same conviction that will help people begin to see, yes, this is the change that is necessary. Sabotage. I don't like to think about it in the life of the church or in the life of any organization, but when I read this chapter, it was strangely encouraging to consider that sabotage is a normal part of transformational change. You haven't really succeeded in transformational change until you've begun to encounter it, and then stayed the course, stuck with the principles, remembered that the mission trumps every other decision, and move forward. I hope that you'll join me next week as we move into part 5, Transformation, and chapter 14, How a Nursing Mother Saved America. I'm so glad that you're part of this Leader Development Book Club, and whether you're with Susanna, Wesley, or some other organization, take action today. Remember that sabotage is part of the transformational process, and be courageous as you seek to lead into the future.